Well, you've heard what I think. Let's find out what our good friend and perhaps the world's only reasonable bucknut thinks. Mark Rogers, who has a fantastic channel here on YouTube, the voice of college football, correspondents and stringers all over the country. You don't want to miss it. Great information for the greatest sport on earth. It is good to have you back, Mark. How are you, brother?
Steve, I'm doing well. Looking forward to the rest of the season in November football. Should be fabulous in the Big Ten. Of course, we've only got 3 games that matter, and 1 is already in the books, decidedly, and we've got 2 to go.
So you picked Penn State to pull the upset on the show here last week, and you weren't alone. There were, frankly, a lot of smart people in the punditry across the country that did. I know a lot of sharps that I follow that gamble on football and sports for a living. They picked Penn State as well. The game did not go in terms of dominance the way I think anybody thought that it would. If there was ever a game where you could say it was 41-17 and it wasn't that close, this, without trolling or talking smack, this would be it. I mean, Michigan left a lot of points on the field, kicked 4 red zone field goals in this game, had 18 of the first 19 first downs in this game. Michigan finished with a 28-10 first down advantage. That's usually, playing Akron or somebody in the MAC, not a top 10 team or even a top 25 team in the Big Ten. Hell, not even really a lot of teams in the Big Ten. So as you watched this unfold on Saturday and then the end result, you thought what?
Well, first, most importantly, Steve, we've got to clear up the prediction record. I'm very guarded about my prediction record. Yes, you put me on the spot. I picked Penn State on Tuesday. I picked Michigan officially. Yes. There was just too much going in Michigan's advantage win column heading into that. The things that I think I outlined why Michigan was the logical pick, but I was just kind of leaning Penn State at that point. I guess Ohio State fans, the wise ones, are starting to take notice because it was a foregone conclusion for Ohio State fans leading into this season. Michigan's got a good team. They're a good team, but we're maybe the best team in the country, and certainly we still own the Big Ten, and they've got to come to Columbus. Well, what we saw on display at the Big House is coming to Columbus in about 6 weeks, and it's serious. It's serious. I want to give your offensive linemen some love here, Steve. This was a dominant performance, and we've mentioned it over and over, especially after that Iowa game. But, Ryan Hayes and Trevor Keegan, Carson Barnhart, Zach Center, sorry I don't have them memorized, Olu Oluwatimi, of course, being the Virginia transfer. These guys need some name recognition because they were just blowing out the Penn State offensive or defensive front, which we knew was undersized and that would be an advantage for Michigan. But to, I believe, what your point is about Penn State's status in college football, maybe they're not a top 10 team. They're not elite. We could go on and take this in another direction in regards to James Franklin's inability to raise and upgrade this program. However, they just sent 6 defenders to the NFL draft last season. They will send a boatload more. They're a good team. They're a talented team. And Michigan just destroyed them, obliterated them, just dominated physically, schematically, in every such way possible. That the matchups that I talked about last week that I really wanted to see, wide receiver, defensive back play on both sides, really didn't factor into this because it was a bullying up front on both sides of the ball by the Wolverines.
I think, and I talked about this before you came on, Mark, I think this cements something that I was talking with you, I think it was with you about a week ago, that I think what happened after 2020 and the disaster of that season, when frankly Jim Harbaugh should have been fired. And if he were not one of the most decorated players in the history of this program, if he were not arguably the greatest quarterback in the history of this program, and had not turned down numerous NFL jobs to come rescue this program and then stay here for the first few years after he arrived, then I think he would have. The exact same profile, somebody that was not such a vested, beloved member of the family, no way he gets a chance to rebound. But he was given that chance. And I think what he did in response to that is did some soul searching and realized, I've kind of tried everything here to beat Ohio State and get over the hump. except what I really do best. And I think he went to the Stanford blueprint. I think he recognized, last year, I told you last year, I chuckled at Josh Gaddis winning the Broyles Award for what? Running Jim Harbaugh's offense? Wrong. Michigan assistant got that award. And you're seeing that now at Miami with him down there. Okay. I think Jim recognized, if I got to go down here, man, I'm going down my way, swinging. We're going to run my offense. And I think that what he did at Stanford, why try to recruit with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly? Why try to innovate with them? Why not, styles make fights? Why not get them to play a style that they're not accustomed to? Penn State's analyst, including a guy by the name of Jack Ham, does he know a little bit about football, do you think, Mark? Maybe knows a thing or two. I was curious to get kind of some of their thoughts, because I was flabbergasted at the outcome either. I did not expect it like this. Like, if it was 41-17, I'd expected, we got the pass rush in there, forced 3 or 4 turnovers, short field. You know what I'm saying? I had no idea that this was going to play out the way that it did. And their analysts, including Jack Ham, all said the same thing. Penn State has constructed a defense, and a lot of teams in this league have, to stop Ohio State and those receivers, and to figure out how to get smaller, short, quicker, faster. The idea of someone saying, hey, we're coming downhill, here we go, see if we can stop it. They just don't have a lot of guys with a lot of junk in the trunk, to, use an expression, to plop down in there to occupy a couple gaps. And there's not a lot of teams in college football that kind of do. And we saw this last year, and we're seeing it this year. And I thought that J.J. McCarthy would lead to an offensive evolution. Instead, what he is he is the Andrew Luck offensive expansion. Oh, no, we're still giving it to Toby Gerhart 30 times. I mean, that's what we do here, okay? But rest assured that if you decide we're just going to go 8-9 in the box every down, okay, then we'll let Andrew Luck throw the football and kill you. One team we have played this year decided they were going to bring everybody downhill at the snap, Indiana. And J.J. McCarthy threw for nearly 300 yards and a half. And I think that's what he has determined fits the Michigan brand, fits the tradition and culture of Michigan, and gives us a contrast where we can maybe beat or at least compete with Ohio State annually with top 10 or 12 recruiting classes, when we probably can't have top 5 recruiting classes like Ohio State has. And maybe we compensate for that by forcing the Buckeyes to play a different style of football. And I found it fascinating that that's what the Penn State intelligentsia was talking about after that game on Saturday. Your thoughts now after maybe further demonstration of my hypothesis?
Well, I think it's pretty fascinating that Michigan will continue to rely on the type of offensive style that they've built, which is extremely effective. But they've got the wide receiver core and the quarterback who can threaten a defense to keep them honest, and that's got to be partially why the running game is so successful.
You saw that in the Iowa game. Iowa's linebackers had to hesitate at the snap for a half a second every time. And if you do that, then with that offensive line, you're dead. You're dead in the water. You take one false step with that offensive line, man, you're getting dominated up front, and it's because of the threat that J.J. McCarthy might keep it.
So what this does is, even in a game like they played against Penn State, where you only throw it 22 to 25 times, and most of those aren't downfield throws, but you present the threat that has to be recognized. But if you get into the shootout, they're fully capable of expanding that and playing a shootout if need be. If somebody really wants to load up against the run, or if somebody's prolific on the other side of the ball, scoring against their defense, which is going to be difficult to do, and it becomes more 42-38 range, they can do it. They can do it. They've shown me enough with their wide receiver core last year, and JJ's splashes here and there, Wisconsin and a few other times, but most notably the times that he's been able to air it out. Sure, he needs to sharpen up those throws a little bit, but he's off by 1 or 2 throws that we've seen when he's tried to take those shots downfield. That, either the threat of it opens up the run, or if they need to go to it, they will probably be fully capable of doing so.
Can you think of a time physically? We did this to Penn State in 2016 when they won the Big Ten that year. But remember, they were playing walk-on linebackers. They had cluster injuries on that unit, if you recall, in that game. And Saquon Barkley, I should say, and he's a great player, Steve. Get his name right. Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley, that was pretty early in the year. That was like the Big Ten first or second game that year. And those guys, with the new offensive system, weren't kind of known commodities that they were by the time we got to November. And I bring that up because that might be the last time that I can remember a Big Ten, team that recruits at the level that Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State do, that they physically did that at the line of scrimmage to the other, right? When we've seen Ohio State run people off the field, it's just, you just got mossed, all over the place, right? I mean, when was the last time you can recall that kind of throwback butt whooping on both sides of the line of scrimmage? Sean Clifford, 7 out of 19, throwing the football. I think Penn State's running backs carried, for something like 48 yards total or something in the game. So the dominance was on the other side of the line of scrimmage as well, Mark.
Yeah, so the Penn State rushing attack and the numbers that they showed us are what we were used to Penn State delivering up until this season. They add the 2 freshman running backs, Singleton and Allen. They're exceptional. The offensive line's played better. I know Auburn's not what they typically are along the defensive front, which has been a top 5 defensive front in college football the past 5 or 6 years. But Penn State goes down there and lays 245 on the ground against them, and they can do nothing. The Sean Clifford numbers that you raise seem to speak to the average college football fan. Sean Clifford detractor would say, well, yeah, Sean Clifford's no good. He went 7 of 19. Watch the game. He was chucking the ball. He was just getting rid of it. He had no chance in that game. As you well know, Penn State pulled off 2 plays in the first half of the game to stay close, of course. Smoke and mirrors. Man, I was trying to think back to Ezekiel Elliott rushing days, but those were mostly, well, I guess in the playoffs. I guess even though the score was more egregious, I don't know that the dominance was more when Ohio State laid waste to Wisconsin 59-0 in the Big Ten championship game, and Zeke Elliott started his run of 230-yard rushing days. That's the first thing I can come up with.
So whether we're talking 2014, that championship game there that year, or 2016, the Michigan-Penn State game that I cited, we're going back a ways. At least we're going back a few years since we saw this kind of molly-whopping. Thoughts before we get out of here, because we'll have plenty of time to next week to preview the game against Michigan State. If I had to guess, knowing how terrible its secondary is, again, Michigan State is going to be the first team to say, other than, or maybe the second team to say, besides Indiana, you know what, we just can't let you do this to us all game long. And our secondary sucks anyway, so we got to take something away. All right, and if J.J. McCarthy throws for 400 yards against us, so be it. But we just can't sit here as an in-state rival little brother on national TV, primetime at night, and let you just run the ball down our throats and take our manhood away from us for 300 yards. So get the J.J. McCarthy highlight tape ready to go. If I had to guess, that's what Sparty will do, but we'll talk about that next week. Let's talk about Penn State. And where do you think they go from here now? Franklin's record against against Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State is not very good. They were 11-11 coming in his last 22 games coming into this season. Remember, they started 5-0 last year too, and then Sean Clifford got hurt. So they were 5-0 this year. Clifford, I guess, was hurt. I don't know. I mean, I watched him walk up the tunnel. Because I watched all the tunnel videos of all the fights and of everything. I watched him walk up the tunnel all by himself without a trainer after the game Saturday. So he might have just said, "Listen, man, I took enough hits. We're not winning. I'm calling it a day." You can't blame him for that either. So I don't know if he's hurt or not. But they've got Minnesota this week. They've still got Ohio State as well. Where do you think Penn State is right now?
The peanut butter and jelly fights, from what I understand.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, my goodness. James Franklin's 0-9 against top 10 competition on the road. I think there needs to be an identity. I don't think just recruiting a bunch of athletes, and that identity isn't just schematic. I think that's a lot of it, but I think it is just something that separates a good football coach from a great leader, and I don't want to overstate it, Jim Harbaugh being a great leader, or in the past, Urban Meyer at Ohio State, and I bypass Ryan Day just temporarily to say, okay, this is the guy that established what Ohio State football is today. But, the type of detail that we see out of a Nick Saban, he's the one that's the most famous for the process and the detail of, I am going to examine every nook and cranny of this program because this is what I want it to be. And this is what it has to be to succeed. I'm smart enough to know what I'm capable of, what type of staff I want, not just, okay, we've got an offensive coordinator position open, let's go interview some guys. And every thread of grass on the field, I know everything that I want this program to be. And then I'm going to weigh that against the conference. I'm going to weigh that against the landscape of college football. And that may alter me slightly, but I still believe in my core values and what this needs to be. And I don't know that James Franklin thinks to that level or really can execute that vision if it's there.
Yeah, what is their identity? Really, they've had one great season there that they didn't have Joe Moorhead calling the plays. Okay, one. And that was the Journey Brown year when they beat Memphis in the New Year's Six Bowl. That's the one great season they had there when Joe Moorhead wasn't calling the plays for Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley, right? Arguably the best running back and quarterback and combo in the history of that program. And that's, a top 5, 7, 8 program of all time. So that is saying something. I don't know what their identity is. That was the question with Ohio State when Urban Meyer moved on, because he was really the Ohio State identity. And then Ryan Day has established an identity with, with his ability to call a game, the stress he puts on your team offensively, their style of offense, the fleet of receivers they put on the field. Michigan has its identity with its physicality. Wisconsin, good or bad, has an identity. Iowa, good or bad, has an identity, right? PJ Fleck has an identity at Minnesota. This is his 9th year. It's year 9. What is the culture and identity of Penn State football? What is it?
And that's what I was leading to. I can't put an identity on it. I can't label it. I can't get around it other than we go out and recruit the best possible athletes we can bring in. And when we throw them on a field together and call plays, that they'll be successful. But that's not an identity. That's not a culture. That's basically James Franklin. I don't want to discard him as a complete non-entity. He's obviously a successful football coach, but I think that's more about personality. That's being able to engage with young men and, reel them in and build relationships, and all that's very important. But in terms of overarching program tenets and purposes, I don't know that it's there.
Good stuff as always, my friend. We'll talk to you next week before the big game against Sparty for Paul Bunyan. All right, take care.
Sounds good, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you.